I've definitely struggled with the bigger you get and like the busier you get, the more it pulls you out of your sweet spot. So like the sweet spot I was in that got the whole entire company off the ground was like being on the gym floor, coming up with innovative programming, pushing people harder than they'd ever been pushed before. It was really like the foundation of the company. And I've had less and less time to do that as we've grown and scaled. Like someone should be the CEO potentially so I can be back on the gym floor a little more. And like I'm completely okay with that because that would be more in my sweet spot. And then that would allow the company to scale to really change those 100,000 lives. But it's certainly not easy.
You're listening to the Born Primitive Podcast. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Born Primitive Podcast. Here with my co-host, Big Tone. Big Tone, good morning.
Good morning, Bear.
And today we have a guest, a friend of ours, an absolute badass, fitness entrepreneur, strength and endurance athlete, and avid outdoorsman. This individual originally worked for a Fortune 500 think tank, but realized that wasn't for him. Left the kind of corporate world and pursued his passion for fitness and the outdoors. Would go on to launch a company called MTNTOUGH with his wife, which is an online fitness training program for backcountry hunters, military, and first responders. And it features programming from experts in the special operations and hunting community. So pretty cool thing. Obviously, for those that have done the backcountry hunting, you know the physical demands of what that is. So Dustin and his crew have rolled out some pretty awesome programming for a guy that's prepping for the elk hunting season to get out there and being able to get to places that maybe others couldn't get to because of the massive kind of fitness component tied to that. So without further ado, Dustin Diefenderfer, welcome to the Born Primitive Podcast.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me.
So I want to, you have an interesting path, man. So you got your business degree. You went to this Fortune 500 think tank. You did that for a while. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of realize, hey, this isn't really what I want to be doing. And then you ended up going to do an overseas mission at an orphanage for rescued children, child soldiers in Uganda. So I guess walk us through that transition. Obviously, those are two wildly different worlds, but also I'm super curious, what you got out of the mission thing, because I would imagine it's one of those things, man. It's like ignorance is bliss, and we live in this free society with comforts and best country in the world. But I would imagine getting exposed to other parts of the world where you see stuff that's pretty bad, that can actually have a pretty big impact on your outlook on life, knowing that there's a lot of people out there in the world that are suffering, and we're over here, in air conditioning and iPhones and all these things. So I'd love to get into that if that was something you experienced. But yeah, walk us through it, man. How'd you go from business to Uganda?
Yeah, it's been a pretty wild journey. Like it's a journey like I never could have scripted or planned out, but it's all kind of led to where we're at today, which is cool in hindsight to look how all those steps played into the MTNTOUGH culture and team and what we're doing now. But the story started probably with my childhood. So growing up in Billings, Montana, we were hunting and fishing, backpacking family. So we spent a ton of time outdoors. My dad came from a family of 9. 7 of the 9 were boys. So I had 7 uncles that were just passionate about backpacking, archery, elk hunting, deer hunting, fishing. So we spent our whole childhood kind of like stomping around outside of Billings into Wyoming in the Bighorns on a lot of different trips. And so my whole youth, that was kind of what our family was all about. I remember starting to archery hunt for elk when I was 14. My dad was a competitive archer, indoor competitive archer. And so we were at the bow shop every day. He shot every single day at noon for his lunch break, and I'd meet him over there. And so these outdoor pursuits were building and building and building. But at the same time, I was following, probably looking at it now, I was doing a lot of what the world tells you to do. So the world kind of tells you to like go to college. So I went to college, and I didn't have a certain thing I wanted to specialize in, like engineering or anything like that. So I was like, I'll just get a business degree. Kind of, I think, listening more to what the world's telling you to do than what you actually want to do. So I got a business degree at MSU in Bozeman. And same thing, like Bozeman is the epicenter of a lot of these outdoor pursuits. So I'm still doing a ton of fishing, a ton of hunting, a ton of archery elk hunting. And we're kind of elk hunting all over the Rocky Mountain West at this point, all the way through college. And I was still guiding fly fishing full time to pay for college. So our family was super blue collar, because like this big family, and it was like, you want to go to college, you pay for it. You want a car, you pay for it. You need insurance on your car, you get a second job and pay for it. And that's how I've always been, and how our family's been. So for getting that business degree at Montana State, I would guide fly fishing the whole entire summer on the Bighorn River. I'd save all that money and come up and write a check to MSU every year. And when I graduated from MSU, I had a marketing degree, a management degree, and an entrepreneurship degree. And right away, this organization hired me. And I thought at first it was this dream situation, because I had the business degree. They were a Fortune 500 think tank organization, and it was a startup. So it was pretty cool. It was like 9 guys in this tiny little office. And the founder had created this concept where a lot of different C-level executives at different organizations want to share ideas with each other, especially from non-competing industries. So I had just graduated. They were paying me a ton of money, and I had all the benefits. And I was interviewing like the COO. My group was COOs. So I was interviewing like the COO of Nike, American Express, Starbucks, United Airlines, UPS. And the executives thought that I was like some professional executive in Chicago, but I was a 20-year-old kid in Bozeman. And I actually had a mattress separating me from the other guy in the office, so we wouldn't hear each other on the phone all day. And so the startup vibe was really cool, and learning from those executives was phenomenal. Like getting to learn what they were navigating through at that time. I had really no idea how valuable that was going to become later on. But because of my outdoor background and my passion for hunting and fishing and fitness, the whole fitness journey had started as well. Like through college, we were training a ton in the gym for these backcountry hunts. And I met my wife in college, who's a runner. So that led us down this whole marathon and ultra marathon route. And it was that lifting for hunting with the running that ultimately ended up combining into the creation of Mountain Tough. But I was stuck in that corporate job on the phone. We were on the phone like 12 hours a day, and it was before Zoom. So we were using like freeconferencecall.com, and you're on the phone like 12 hours a day. So I was pretty miserable with that corporate setting. And my wife was in a similar situation. She had just graduated with a marketing degree. She was at a really cool agency. They were paying her a lot of money, but she was pretty miserable in like the office desk job scenario as well. So we both decided to quit our jobs. We quit at the same time, and we went to Ethiopia together first. So we went to Ethiopia on a mission trip through our church, and the mission trip was all around working with kids that lived in the landfill. So it would be like being in the Virginia Beach landfill, and you got like 200 kids that just live there, like in the city dump. They sleep there, they eat there. And the reason they're there is because they're picking through the landfill looking for stuff to eat all day. So they're either looking for stuff to eat, or they're looking for like plastic bottles to go sell for some money. And it was mind blowing. Like it was a very rewarding trip. But when we came home from that trip, we were certainly in like a post-trip depression type scenario where you're back in America, everything's really squared away, life's really good, you have all these resources, all these options, and we were young and we had no kids and really no responsibilities, and so we signed up to go right back to Africa. And there was a local Bozeman guy that was building orphanages in Uganda. The reason he was in Uganda is Joseph Kony had gone through Uganda and killed like 600,000 people. And Joseph Kony is the infamous warlord who was killing people with a lot of child soldiers. And so he sent us to a campus that he had created that had 240 kids. And it was right up our alley. It was so perfect for us. Like his vision was to help these kids become future leaders, not just pull them out of Africa. So he wanted to teach them entrepreneurship skills so that they could pay for their own school and eventually create their own life in Uganda. And I love entrepreneurship so much. So that was perfect for me. My wife had transitioned into becoming a nurse, and so she was running the nursing side of the campus. And there's 240 kids there. We have like a pineapple grove. The kids are selling pineapples as a small business. We had a tilapia pond, so we're selling fish for a business. And it's like 24/7 adventure, 24/7 adrenaline. Like 20% of the kids were actual child soldiers themselves, and the rest of the kids were rescued as orphans. But a lot of the child soldiers had also been rescued because it was a scenario where like you either fought for Joseph Kony or you got shot. So one of our kids that was at that campus, like Joseph Kony asked his brother if he wanted to fight for the LRA, which was his thing. The Lord's Resistance Army was Joseph Kony's thing. And his brother said no, and he just smoked him right in the head, right next to the other kid. So the other kid says yes. He says yes, otherwise he's going to get shot. And like that night, he had to go in and like kill a family of 6 with a machete. So like the things that these kids were going through over there, and like the lifestyle over there was insane. But the profound impact it had on us was like it changed the whole entire trajectory of our life, because not only had we never seen anything like that before, but we also saw the power of like a positive community and how a positive community could change like their whole trajectory.
Damn, man, that's so intense. That's crazy. Just makes you think, man. Like, I'm not as read in as you are on that kind of international affairs situation, but it makes you wonder, like, how the heck did somebody not go in and whack that guy and just bulldoze that army? You know what I mean?
I know.
Like, what the hell? You know, it's all these things that we get involved in, and not to say we need to be the world police, but like, you got a dude slaughtering kids with probably no real military might behind him. I mean, again, can't be the world police, but as an international community, like, how the hell did that go on? And I wish I could read up more on it. I mean, I remember it happening and the name obviously, but to hear it kind of like that, man, because that kid will never be the same, you know. He got to see his brother get smoked, and then that night he's killing a family of 6 with a machete. Like, that kid will never recover from that. It's just crazy that the absolute savages that are exist in this world, that it's like it's almost a subhuman level, man. Like, the fact that you can be on this earth and condone that sort of thing. And I mean, man, so with these kids, did you see them come around to this new life, or was there major PTSD that they were carrying? I mean, what was the age range you were dealing with?
Yeah, so the age range we were dealing with was infant until 16. So we had a primary school there, which would be like your elementary school, and then a secondary school. which would be your middle school. And we did see some kids start to change, which I think was one of the coolest things we got to witness. Was like, those kids are always going to struggle, especially the ones that were the child soldiers themselves, for sure. And honestly, the kids that were child soldiers for months would kind of walk around like zombies. Like, they would have like no light in their eye, no body language, no expression. They were just kind of like out on the campus like zombies. And a lot of them never recovered from that, but the small percentage that did was insane. And usually the kids that like were able to make a turnaround, they made a turnaround because of that like supportive community around them. And they kind of started taking their eyes off like what they had been through. And you'd see them like start helping the next new guy that arrived. And like, that's always been a really awesome lesson for me, is like, it's one of those like mental toughness hacks that you see in a workout or you see in training, where things don't suck as bad when you like watch someone else who's sucking and you're like, oh, it sucks to be that guy. Maybe I can go cheer that guy up. And as soon as you do that, like, all your problems shrink down. We saw a lot of that, where like these like more senior kids that had been through the worst stuff ever, they would like embrace the new guy that showed up.
Yeah, that's so spot on, and like that is a life hack, man. That's what got me through my military training, was that exact tactic. You know what I mean? You focus on the other guys that are struggling, and you immediately forget about your own pain, and that's applicable in life too. If you're down in the dumps, but there's some friends or people close to you that are going through their own shit, and you reach out to them and you try to help them through it, you quickly forget about your own things. So anyone that's battling that right now, if you're looking for options, highly recommend reach out to people that also are in need, because that is it's a crazy phenomenon. I'd love to get like a psychologist on here and talk through like what is occurring in the brain to make that phenomenon occur. But that's so cool that the guys started to pay it forward a little bit when new guys came in that were about to go on that same journey. And how long were you guys at the orphanage?
So we were there for a full year. It was a full year. We thought we were gonna, like, we were committed. We built a little guest house over there. That was our plan, certainly, for like the next 5 to 10 years. We really enjoyed it. And then my wife got pregnant with our first kid. So she was pregnant over there, and our plan was still to continue on after the baby was born. And we were pretty naive. So we had planned to live in that guest house. We were going to fly home to Bozeman and deliver our first daughter in the Bozeman hospital, and then just stay with family and friends for a couple of weeks, and then head back over and go back to work. And that was the plan all the way up until the point my daughter was born. And when my daughter was born, I, like, the second she was born, I was like, there's no way I can take her back over to Africa right now, which is really funny thinking about it now, because that was our plan, was like, she was going to be born in Bozeman, and then we're going to head right back and go back to work with her. But being naive and young and never having kids before, like, we had no idea how much that was going to change our life and wreck our life. And when she came out as like a real human that we were responsible for taking care of and like protecting and providing for, there was just no way. So with like the safety and security and health concerns and travel risks, we knew that was no longer an option, which was pretty funny, because when that became like an option that was off the table, we were stuck in Bozeman without a plan B, because like plan A was to have her born in Bozeman and go back. So having no plan B at all is what led to the creation of Mountain Tough, which is awesome for me to look at now, because we're back home. We have this little tiny baby daughter that was just born, and we don't have jobs because we were planning on going back to Uganda with her. But for years, I'd always been thinking about Mountain Tough because of our elk hunting experience and because of our fitness and running experience, I always saw this real huge opportunity for mission specific training for the backcountry hunter. And in 2016 is when we started. And in 2016, like no one was creating any sort of mission specific training for the backcountry hunters. So that had always been an obvious blue ocean opportunity that I was keeping my eye on, because like all elite sporting organizations and the military, anyone who's taking things to that next level is doing some variation of mission specific training. So they're not just training to train, they're training specifically for a specific reason to accomplish a specific goal. And in 2016, when we were kind of stuck on the ground, no one in the country was doing that at all for the backcountry hunter. And I had seen enough guys come out west and like get crushed by the backcountry, get crushed by elevation, that I knew there was a demand for that. And so it started really bootstrapped. We were home with our daughter, and I was like, all right, I got no plan B, which I like now, because it was kind of like that burn the ships. It was like, this has to work. And we created the logo. So the Mountain Tough logo, I wrote on a napkin. My buddy, who's a graphic designer, turned it into our logo that's still the same today. And I created a flyer, and this is an old school flyer with like, you tear off the phone number at the bottom.
Hell yeah. You like post it up at the bus stop. There's like 15 little tabs. Yeah.
It has like the puppies for sale next to it, like the firewood guy, and then like me with like the tear off
guy. Yep.
So
that was the initial marketing plan, huh? The flyers with the tearaway tabs.
That's the customer acquisition plan right there.
That's what got us off the ground, was that flyer. And it said, it had the logo, and then it said, looking to train backcountry hunters. And I only hung like 3 of them up. I hung them up at the bow shops here in Bozeman.
Okay.
And it started, I got like 3 phone calls, and I started training 3 guys in the park behind my house. So, because I still didn't even have a gym or anything. So we just were training in the park, and we were doing like lunges across the soccer field and pull-ups on the monkey bars. And then the park sessions started to explode. So like it went from 3 guys to pretty soon I had like 3 park sessions a day with like 20 people each. And then we moved into our first ever gym. And when we moved into our first ever gym, like that's when Mountain Tough exploded locally. So it was really obvious that locally there was a demand for this concept, for this like mission specific backcountry concept. And so all of 2016, it was just this local Bozeman, Montana. If you want to train for the backcountry, you go to Mountain Tough. And we were running a bunch of classes and had an amazing local community. And then in 2017 is when the catalyst events started to happen. So in 2017, I assembled the founding team of Mountain Tough, because that first year it was just me. In that first year, I knew that to be consistently successful in the backcountry, you have to almost have more mental toughness than you do physical fitness. So like everyone I knew and everyone that we had studied, like the consistent guys, the guys that are like successful on archery elk for like 10, 20 years, their mental toughness, like their grit and their will is way stronger than someone who's not getting it done. So I knew that mental toughness had to be like the key cornerstone of our entire brand. And so that original team that I assembled, we had a Army Ranger, we had a Navy SEAL, and then we had a legendary Bozeman personal trainer that was helping a lot of the like local legends on like K2 trips, Everest trips, and then myself. And we got in a room and we're like, we got to take this online for the world to see, because obviously locally there's a demand for it. So 2017, we built that team and we built the first online program, and we put it online just on a website. There was no app back then. And we put it on a website. You could access Mountain Tough Backcountry Hunter preseason prep. we just had one program. You paid $300 for it, and it just exploded. It was like the market was kind of like sitting there waiting for it the whole time, because no one had ever offered like a step-by-step plan to be like successful on a sheep hunt, successful on a goat hunt. And everyone knew they should probably be training for those trips, but they didn't know how. So it just kind of took off from there, and it's been the same ever since.
And did you, the initial, because, and as you know, Dustin, I've used the app a ton now, has the programming evolved a ton over time? Or when you first launched it, or even when you were in the park, what did you expose yourself to from a programming aspect? Because I would say from personal experience, there's the metabolic conditioning of like what you would get in a CrossFit gym, but then there's the movement specific that you can tell as somebody who grew up hunting on the East Coast, so very different than West Coast hunting. You can just tell there's a very intentional focus on, let's say, like being able to vertically climb. Like that's something, if you do the programming right away, you're like, oh, this is going to set me up to be able to scale very well. Where did your background in programming, like, and I'm sure you pulled from a lot of places, but where were your strengths from programming? And then I'm sure members of that team were able to contribute in a way, but has that evolved a lot over time, or has it been pretty consistent?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it kind of came from two different routes. The first route was when I met my wife, I was crazy consumed with backcountry elk hunting, and she was crazy consumed with marathon running and ultra marathoning. And so I was always a lifter, and I hated running. But then when I met her, I started dabbling in like marathons with her. And what I fell in love with right away was like the mental side of marathon running and ultra marathon running. Like your whole body's telling you to shut down, but you got to mentally find a way to just get across that finish line. So I went down this like pretty long journey of running ultras with her, and all of those races are in the Rocky Mountain West. So like the 50Ks in Montana and Wyoming are always in the same mountains you're going to elk hunt in later that year. So I thought it was this perfect recipe to be really, really successful in the backcountry, because you're running a 50K in a lot of times the same range that you're going to be hunting in 2 months later. And you're lean and mean, and you're like just flying through the backcountry after a summer of training, running at high elevation. But what happened was I killed a bull that fall, and this is right about around the same year as we were getting off the ground. And it was like one of my worst pack outs of all time. So even though I had done the most amount of running ever in the mountains, it was the worst pack out of all time. And that's really when these light bulbs started going off, that like this training has to be mission specific, because the mission of a backcountry hunter is pretty unique. Like the military is the closest, but it's still different, because like a backcountry hunter is going to have an extended event. So it's usually 3, 5, 7, 10 days. So 3 to 5, 7 to 10 days of work. In your last few days, if you're successful, are going to be your hardest days. So the demands of that extended event, and then the demands of the heavy pack. So like an average elk hunter in Montana that kills an elk with their bow or their rifle, if they quarter that animal up, they're going to have like 4 80-pound loads to get that off the mountain. If they're alone, like if you're 7 miles back, like you're coming out 7 miles 4 times with that 80-pound load, and then you're going in light. But so you're covering a lot of mileage over a lot of days with some really heavy packs. And so the mission specific orientation of Mountain Tough really kind of came out of those scenarios where you can't have too much cardio and be successful. You can't just bodybuild and be successful. You should be training for this exact mission. And I think that's what you're seeing, Tony, when you like see how our programming is a little bit different, is because of some of those examples. But it also is from one of our core principles. When we went online in 2017, we said we would never go online with a program until it had been tested. So our headquarter building has always been a lab. So the name's MTNTOUGH Fitness Lab. And the reason for that is that all of our programming has to be tested, and we have to make sure it works on the mountain before it goes out to the public for other consumers to access in the app. And so our filter for success is someone performing better on the mountain after this program than before.
Yeah, and I think that's, as somebody, and I know Bear can say this as well, as somebody, as a college athlete and then just always a lover of fitness, like you get exposed to so many different styles of programming, so many different like systems that give you different results, whether it's, the bodybuildings, the metabolic conditionings, the aerobics. And I think you build a good like sniff test for a shitty program and also for a good one. And that's like the word I would use to describe you guys is intentional. Like the first time I was in the app and did a couple of the workouts and then put together a couple months continuously of doing it, you realize like, holy shit, like there's no marketing gimmick to the product they're offering. Like you guys, like the product you have sells itself, because I would find myself talking to people about it and then all of a sudden they're doing it and then their friends are doing it. And these are all high performing individuals, a lot of which are in the special forces community. It's like, damn, they were intentional with this product, because that started with me doing it because you guys, of course, were kind enough to offer me a membership. And then all of a sudden I'm realizing 22 people in my friend group are doing it. And that's like, that's the light bulb moment. And I'm sure you guys have had this more and more of like, holy shit, there's a really solid product here that had a lot of thought and a lot of intention go behind it, because it sells itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Dustin, were there guys like before this became more prevalent and there was a more of an emphasis on fitness in like the backcountry hunting scene? I mean, were there instances where guys were shooting a bull and then like having to come to grips that like, we're not getting this all out of here. Like I'm not doing 28 miles with, round trip with, you know what I mean? Like, I guess, how is the fitness in the backcountry from your optic? Because obviously you've been doing it forever, evolved. I would imagine, this is just a guess, but back in the day, it was probably some good old boys that were just kind of like doing it enough that they had kind of like field endurance, but they weren't doing some high end like strength and conditioning program. I mean, they're crushing bush lights and like going out in the field, right? Like, I guess walk me through the evolution of kind of, I guess, awareness of, okay, the need to deliberately train for it, and maybe the reasons why. And my guess would be, people were getting kind of exposed in the field, or they're not even able to get to areas they need to get to because they know they don't possess the fitness to carry it out, even if they can get a bull. You know what I mean? So, walk me through that evolution.
Yeah, it's pretty spot on. And I think it's been fun to watch, because when I was younger, people were still killing a lot of elk in the backcountry with their bows, but they weren't going quite as far back, and there wasn't quite as much pressure. And you're 100% accurate that those folks that were successful back then had a lot of field endurance, because they were hiking all the time or doing it all the time. And then as the world has changed over the last 10 or 20 years, one thing that did change the game was like this concept of an actual backcountry hunter athlete. And that's still relatively new, but it has been adopted a lot more in the last 5-10 years than ever before. So like the Cameron Haynes movement, I give him a ton of credit for kind of like kicking that whole thing off. He pushed people to push themselves harder in the backcountry. He's never really given anyone like a step-by-step plan on how they can do it themselves, but he's certainly inspired like a generation of hunters to go deeper and stay longer. And there's definitely some other guys that have done the same thing. And what that has created is a scenario where the backcountry hunter demographic is exploding. So like in America right now, hunting numbers are down, but backcountry hunting numbers are through the roof. So like your Minnesota farm kid isn't hunting deer as much in the field behind his house as before, but people traveling out west to come on all these different trips, those numbers are through the roof and higher than ever before. And when those numbers got higher, then like the game pushed further back. So like the good spots that used to be close aren't good anymore because all the animals are 2, 3, 4 ridges further back than before. So like the backcountry hunter athlete generation and the increase in numbers and pressure has made it everything a lot more challenging in a lot of ways than it used to be like 10 years ago. And because of that, there, from the fitness standpoint, there are a lot of people that come out and get crushed by the mountain. So there's a lot of people that have had friends come out, or there's a lot of folks from the Midwest that are just intimidated to like go on a Colorado elk hunt or a Montana elk hunt. They're intimidated by the high elevation, or they've had friends that have been crushed before. And so usually that leads to an unsuccessful trip. So they usually quit too early or don't make it far enough. Or what you see a lot of is like they'll make it into camp, but then they're stuck in the tent for 2 days, like too sore and too tired to get out and hunt. But certainly there's some examples of people that like get an animal and realize like they are not getting that animal off the mountain. And that usually leads to just like a nightmare scenario where like they're calling for help.
Damn. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, you don't want to be that person.
God, I'm sure it happens though.
Oh yeah, and there is a point where if like you're not ready, like you're not at the gym saying like, oh, you can run another quarter mile. Of course you can do that. Yeah. Like if you're at elevation and you haven't prepared for it, that's not even at that point. You just you literally may not be physically possible if you have not prepared for it.
I remember, in part of our advanced training, we do like a winter survival kind of mountain training up in Alaska, and you come out of the regular training like in the best shape of your life. You know what I mean? You just been working out like 10 hours a day for like 7 months straight, right? And we got up to this thing in Alaska, and one of the instructors was like, he was fat, and we were kind of making fun of him like when he wasn't around, and like he was cool though, but like everyone's in immaculate shape, and then there's this one random fat instructor, so of course like we're gonna bust his balls a little bit. But like the second day you're there, you climb this mountain, and then you stay up on the mountain that night, and you start learning some outdoor skills, and you got to pack a big heavy rucksack, and we got weapons and comms and water and all this stuff. And that guy was in front, and he kicked our ass up that mountain, man. I mean, you have all these like really good conditioned people, and then there's this beer drinking fat guy. But because he lived up there, man, and that's all he did, he had that field endurance. And I remember we got to the top, and I was like, every class probably falls to this trap. You know what I mean? Where this guy,
he's gas station ready.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. He's gas station ready. He's our lead guy. I was like, this is going to be a cakewalk. Like we can keep, because in training, we would do these runs with instructors, and you get like, the running geek would be the one leading like the conditioning run, and you'd be like, oh shit, we're screwed because this guy's like 160 pounds and he has like the foamy running shoes. Like I know this guy can run, and you knew you were in for a world of hurt that day. So when this guy, he's like, all right, fellas, you had this real like Southern accent. He's like, I'm gonna do this hike up. You know what I mean? We're like, oh, this is gonna be a cakewalk, like gentleman's hike. Oh man, we were dying. So it's totally like a different type of fitness, and that's why I like how yours is so intentional, because you can't just go in and, I think being a CrossFit athlete, of course, would help, but definitely not a bodybuilder, definitely not like a power lifter. Like those components, of course, will help, but it has no relevancy at, 7,000 feet when you have a rucksack on and you're going up, a ridge line. Like it's such a different form of fitness. So it's so cool that you guys are breaking it down and preparing people, because I mean, the reward at the end of it when you've earned it is just so much more. Particularly, if you do like, how y'all do it, it's almost like a training camp, you know what I mean? To prepare you for, it's like you're buying your gear, you're getting, you're getting your loadout squared away, but then there's the physical component. So it's the lead up to this experience, and that just makes it so much more fulfilling. So a brilliant idea, man. It's so cool to hear different origin stories with brands, and how people stumble upon these ideas. And definitely, I'm sure you and I have shared, a lot of common, kind of issues kind of going through, building the business and kind of trial by fire and making mistakes early and building it from nothing.
Yeah.
But it's wild, man, how you came to do it. And then just the massive market that you were sitting on, that it sounds like you realized, like intuitively, you were like, there's something to it, but I would imagine not maybe to the extent you thought. And then when you finally hit go on it, and before you know it, you got a park full of dudes when you have no equipment. You guys are lunging across a damn soccer field. Like when those first few guys came up that got the little tearaway at the freaking feed shop or whatever, like what was their reaction when they rolled up to a middle school freaking soccer field and they're like, all right, fellas, we're gonna do some lunges today? Did they think it was gonna be this more dialed in thing, or were they stoked to just kind of learn from you regardless of the lack of kind of professional equipment and shit like that?
They were stoked, man. I think they loved like the authenticity of it, and that we were kind of like figuring it out together. It's kind of like those early adopters are like buying in with you and like helping you create what ultimately ends up being created. I do remember though, like the park sessions had kind of exploded, and like Winters and Bozeman are legit. So like Winter was approaching, and they're like, dude, this is great and all, but you're probably gonna have to like find some sort of gym pretty soon. And that's when I was like, oh man, yeah, like this isn't just a summer thing. So that's when we landed in that first facility, which was pretty hilarious.
And have you evolved to different facilities? Like that's kind of our evolution. We started in garage and then warehouse. But what was your evolution from like an infrastructure standpoint?
Yeah, that part's awesome because we started in those park sessions, and then I leased this tiny little gym space in an orthopedic clinic. And it's hilarious because it was a true miracle that happened, because no one in the world other than this guy would have let us in that space. But there was a guy that was in love with Mountain Tough and the Mountain Tough training that owned an orthopedic clinic. So he's like, come into our space for the winter. We got some weights and some bands and some equipment, but he gave us the mezzanine space of an ortho clinic, so we would have like 20 person classes up on the mezzanine, and then down below you would be like old ladies getting like tennis elbow rehab, and we're like blaring death metal up there, like the whole mezzanine would be shaking. We ended up having to buy a whole new floor for that mezzanine when we moved out, so we had to replace the whole floor. And then we went warehouse, and then we went into the new lab. The new lab we've been in almost a year. It's an amazing world-class facility. So we have a new lab in Bozeman next door to Stone Glacier. It's over 10,000 square feet, but it's like a true research and development facility and a production facility. The amount of content we're putting in the app now is substantial. So it's full-time, 8 hours a day content production to make sure that the consumers training through the app have plenty of content. So it's changed a lot, and testing has ramped up a ton too. So the testing used to be very word of mouth, like, did you feel better on that hunt? But now we're pulling blood, we're running VO2 max. So it's changed a lot in the last couple of years.
Oh yeah, it's awesome, man. And it is, from a business standpoint, is 90+% of your business now app subscribers? Is that your main revenue stream, or have you guys been able to diversify it? I'm assuming you have members that now come in person as well, and that maybe is a membership. But I'm curious on just the business model of the app game and how that's gone.
Yeah, so we did make that transition for about 5 years. It was like half digital, half in-person local. And that the app subscription side of the business continued to grow and grow and grow. And so about 18 months ago, we went all app. So we don't have any local members in the lab, and we don't have any local classes anymore. we have a ton of training going on in the lab every single day because we're always testing the next iteration. But those are just test athletes coming in now, and we're filming content all day, which we had to make that pivot because in the same facility we couldn't film content all day and train locals all day. But that was a tough decision because like the local community was so awesome. But ultimately I'm very happy with that decision because we kind of looked at it of like Mount Tough's huge goal right now is to change 100,000 lives by 2026. And Mountain Tough does a lot of other things inside of our app that helps someone change their life in addition to the physical programming. And a lot of that is like the mental toughness. And we spend other amounts of time taking care of customers holistically. So in the app, it's a holistic approach. It's like, are you sharpening yourself physically, mentally, spiritually, nutritionally, emotionally? And so all of that content is inside of the app. So a lot of folks do go through a complete life change, especially after they train for a backcountry hunt and come out on a backcountry hunt. But we couldn't change 100,000 lives with a lot of in-person local classes. So it was almost like running two competing businesses. And so we made that pivot 18 months ago where like we're all in on the app game now.
Dustin, I would love to dig in a little bit to your kind of personal journey along with the growth of the business. And I think this is for selfish reasons that I'm sure Bear can relate to too. Just that as you scaled, did you find as the founder, and you're still the active CEO, correct?
Correct.
Were you able to stay grounded throughout that process and still spend the time on the things that you really enjoyed, being in the outdoors? Obviously the family side of it, the spiritual side of it. Did you go through any trials and tribulations of becoming over leveraged into the business, or have you found, and I would say if you did, like kudos to you, were you able to find that balance right away and really know that you needed to be spending time kind of in all those different avenues in order to stay grounded and kind of well-rounded?
Certainly there's been a lot of trials and tribulations, and certainly that has been a tough line to walk. I'm doing pretty good with it right now, but it hasn't always been that way. So like Mountain Tough has been all consuming for me in a lot of different ways. So Mountain Tough has like consumed my thoughts and behaviors for like 24/7 for almost 8 years now. And in many ways I'm okay with that because I think like to change the world and to change the game and like to complete your mission successfully, you have to be a little obsessive. So I think a lot of that obsessive nature is okay for founders, and I think it's okay, especially like you have to kind of burn the ships and go all in to be successful as an entrepreneur, successful in business. And I know that there are ways to balance it better, but I think like the amount of work and determination it takes a little bit of that obsessive nature. And we have a limited time like on this earth, so like we might as well go all in and make it happen. And I've definitely struggled with the bigger you get and like the busier you get, the more it pulls you out of your sweet spot. So like the sweet spot I was in that got the whole entire company off the ground was like being on the gym floor, coming up with innovative programming, pushing people harder than they'd ever been pushed before. It was really like the foundation of the company. And I've had less and less time to do that as we've grown and scaled. But I think awareness is huge. So like being aware of that has changed the game, and being like a self-aware person to where you can acknowledge like, I might not be the best CEO. Like someone should be the CEO potentially, so I can be back on the gym floor a little more. And like, I'm completely okay with that because that would be more in my sweet spot. And then that would allow the company to scale to really change those 100,000 lives. But it's certainly not easy.
Yeah, that's great. And go ahead. Did you?
Well, I'm curious. I got to chuckle a little bit.
Yeah.
I see you started it with your wife. And as I think you know, Mallory and I, we used to be married and started this together. And I always joke, like, I would never involve any, hopefully there's a future spouse at some point. They will have zero involvement or primitive. I will never do that again. Have you been able to balance that? Or has it created conflict? Because I would imagine she's probably super invested too. And what we kind of learned is that we were both so all in like hyper focused and, like you said, obsessed with growing this thing, particularly early on. Like it requires everything, particularly if you're not raising a bunch of capital and it's just two people, like you're it, you know what I mean? So how how have you navigated that? At least I think you're still married, so you did better than I did. But how's that been, man?
Oh man, I'm lucky from that aspect, and my situation was different than yours. So like my wife and I were there on ground zero of the original idea and startup, but right away she was doing her own thing and supporting me behind the scenes, and I think that was helpful. And I think like her being like, I believe in you, I trust you, you can make this thing work, but I'm going to be somewhere else, has like helped us a lot. So like nowadays, like she's homeschooling our two daughters. So she's homeschooling my 11-year-old daughter and my 8-year-old daughter. And that's like her full-time mission. But she's working on like mountain tough stuff nights and weekends. She's not a full-time employee. She's not an employee at all. But like her ability to be like, this is your thing, I'm supporting you 110%, even when it sucks, is like probably the only reason I'm here today. And so that's been huge for me, is like her not being here every day, but her supporting me every day has been huge.
Yeah, that's huge, man. Not everyone has that kind of unwavering support. And of course it can create conflict, but I think if whoever you're with, if they can allow you to chase your dreams and really go for it, then I think on the other end, you're that much more loyal and appreciative of the relationship. So for anyone listening that has someone that needs to chase a dream, let them do it, because otherwise there might be some built-in resentment that starts to grow over time, and then it all comes to a head.
Yeah,
Dustin,
you got to have the room.
What and this kind of relates to my question about you, kind of your balance within your role within the company. What advice would you give to an individual building out a team or leading a team now that you've gone through the scaling of Mountain Tough? And because I know here, and I know you can relate to it, and I think we actually talked a little bit about it when we were out in Utah. What advice would you give kind of as somebody either is looking to build out a team or just lead a team?
Yeah, that's been big for us. I think the team dynamics and the right people is completely game changing and awesome when it goes well, and it's very, very difficult when it does not go well. So like the advice I'd give to young entrepreneurs is to be like very, very thoughtful and very strategic around who they're going to add to the team and why, and really making sure that it's like an extremely good culture, character, brand fit before they go through with it. We were actually talking about it this morning, that I wish someone 20 years ago would have told me more about these little red flag alarms that go off in your gut. And I look back now around like some of the worst situations of my life that are related to like interpersonal conflicts. I always had a few red flags before that happened. So I always had a few red flags in my gut, or like one thing that individual might have said, or how they said it, or how they acted in a certain situation. And I've had those red flags, and you brush them off or you're excited about the person's skill set, or you're excited about some capital, and you kind of brush those red flags off and move forward. Every time I've done that, it's created the worst like situations of my life, like some of the most painful, hard to navigate through situations. And so I think for young entrepreneurs, it's like you're excited, people are going to want to get on board, you're going to want people to be on board, but you got to like really listen to that gut. And like if you're getting any red flags at all around potential team members, you gotta slow down and pay attention to those things.
Yeah, love that.
Speaking of capital, have you guys raised any capital yet?
We have. Yeah.
Okay. So do you guys you got private equity guys that are part owners now?
We have friends and family.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good. We haven't gone down that path yet either. So I would imagine if things keep going well for you, that might be a world you'll have to navigate. So get with me offline. We've been through one process and learned a lot. And great things can come of that, but also I would argue a lot of dangers as well if you align with the wrong entity, and they're all about profit. So I see a lot of brands lose their DNA and identity through those dilutions, and you know what I mean. But that's cool, man. You've been able to kind of keep it close to the family and friends, and still build it together. That's really awesome. What's the next 5 years look like for you guys? Crystal ball. What are we going to see happen with Mountain Tough?
So the next 5 years are certainly around changing 100,000 lives, and a lot of ways that we're doing that is around being the authority on backcountry fitness, which I really enjoy, because like we've put our kind of stamp on the ground of being the authority on backcountry fitness. A lot of times when someone asks like what Mountain Tough is and they have no idea, they've never heard of us, one of the easy ways I like can explain it very fast is I'll be like, well, we're the Peloton for badass dudes. And they're like, oh, that makes sense. Like that sounds way better than what I'm doing right now. So like we're going to continue to be the Peloton for badass dudes and continue to be the authority on backcountry fitness. And I think that'll be, in many, many ways, that's going to come from the content we create to make sure like different customers are able to train mission specifically, depending on like how much gear they have. Are they going full gym? Are they going body weight? Are they going sandbag? Are they going limited equipment? And so heavy content production to make sure that we are satisfying all those consumers. And I think most days when I think about that, that's probably going to have to happen through some tech development as well. So we're keeping our eye close on like tech development, because we're delivering content to a lot of consumers right now that are very happy and it's been successful, but there's a lot of bells and whistles we would add to that tech package as well. So the team will remain relatively small, and we'll continue to test everything out of Bozeman.
Yeah, I always the only, and of course, this comes from a good place, is when I'm using the app, if there are a way, and of course you guys have probably thought this 1,000 times, it's like if there are a way to just enter your weights and stuff, you can do it in the notes, which I like. And of course, me and my friends have aliases that we like call each other out in that. But if you could, like within the workout, if say your A set has 4 sets, if you could do your reps and sets within the app and be able to track everything from a user experience, then you could maybe you could see last week's and you would have that right in your hand. Because I know I would print off the PDFs and then be carrying them with me, which is still fine. Yeah. But yeah, if you could track that within the app, that'd be huge.
Yeah, it's all those items that are on our roadmap.
Yep.
Well, I think last thing for me, well, first of all, I think it's worth calling out that for those that are listening, Tony, you've done the program. I'm going to be doing it in January, because we did a winning in the gym episode, and we were kind of calling ourselves out. I just go in the gym now and wing it, because I don't have a lot of time, and Tony was on the program, and there's so much to be said for getting on a program. and obviously you weren't going out west on a hunt and you did the program, right? And you were talking about how awesome it was and you were just getting totally, smoked, but you could scale it down and yada, yada, yada. So anyone listening, you don't need to be getting out on a backcountry hunt to be able to do this, this programming. So, I think it's a great, way to get a well-rounded base of fitness, regardless if you're going out west. But if you are, then definitely get on board with it, because as we know, the shortfalls that could come of not being prepared in the field.
That would be literally, if what he just said about like Peloton for badasses, I have told people like, hey, it's everything. It's all the pros of CrossFit with what I think is like without the cons of like, I don't need to be able to do an overhead squat. I'm 6'7", like that's just not like I'm built like a string bean. So like your programming, what I love about it is like you get the same benefits, because like CrossFit is undeniable as far as building you into like a well-rounded athlete as far as like moving and lifting weight. And that's like Mountain Tough. I've not found a program that maintains all systems, meaning like your strength, your aerobic capacity, and your metabolic conditioning, while not forcing you to do movements that require a ton of skill. And I think that's important, because like a lot of people, man, it's like, I don't have time to get in there and be doing a bunch of dynamic stuff to get me ready to overhead squat. I want to be able to get in there, do a quick warm up to get my heart rate up, and then knock out a workout that has a very low risk. And I would say this about your programming, there's a very low risk of injury. Of course, you're doing barbell squats, you're doing deadlifts. So like the basics there, like if you're not ready for that, you can certainly injure yourself. But even your guys' messaging is always like, hey, this isn't about your weight, like do the movement right. And then, just the accessibility and the easy to execute nature of the programming is where and it relates to what Bear said, like the sky's the limit for you guys. Because as word of mouth gets out, and I love that you guys still stay very intentional to the backcountry, because that's your brand. Like this is it's going to explode outside of that though, because like I said, most of my friends, some of which are in the special forces, so like they have a very applicable reason for doing it. But I know a lot of my friends, it's just because, hey, they were former athletes, they want to stay in shape, they want to look good, and they want to be holistic in the sense that like they're not into just being bodybuilders, they don't want to be runners. And this gives a programming where they're touching on all those systems, and it's fun, man. It's fun to execute a 12-week plan that's mapped out for you and see the results at the end of it.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that's always been huge for us, is longevity, and like longevity through minimizing the risk, because no one wants to like train through the summer for a lifelong dream hunt that maybe they save their whole life for, like a lifetime Alaska mountain goat hunt, and get hurt halfway through that training. So longevity is a big factor for us.
Yeah, and I think I'm supposed to be going with Aaron next August to BC for a mountain goat hunt. So I know he is like a mountain goat, I've heard. So man, I absolutely will be doing a summer program for that one, because I'm not going to be the guy in the back, mouth breathing, trying to keep up with chasing Aaron down. You know what I mean?
We just had a guy who went on an elk hunt that's from here in Virginia Beach, and you know him. He was in your community, and these guys were all special forces, but he was the only one that did a program leading up to this, and it was mountain. He's been doing Mountain Tough even before me, and he said on the trip, out of the 12 dudes, only 3 like were able to do everything on the trip, and 2 of them were doing Mountain Tough. So there was only 1 dude, and these are the most like high trained people in the world. But yeah, it was. I mean, it's a testament to what you guys are doing, and you know that.
We call that being in the
awesome.
goon squad.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Make it, you got goon squad, man. Yeah. And are you going to be at Western Hunt?
I'll be there. Yep.
Awesome. And then is there a TAC out in Big Sky again next year?
I would assume. I don't know if they release it yet. Yeah, I would assume.
Well, cool. Well,
yeah.
dude, we got to get out and see you. Tony and I needed an excuse to go to Montana. So, Tony, let's figure that out. The old tax write-off business trip.
Yep.
But no, at the very least, we come train with you, and maybe we can. I know I was supposed to come out to TAC and had to cancel that one. But definitely in 2024, dude, it would be awesome to get out there and see the facility you've built. And it just sounds so epic, and so proud of you for what you've done, and such a cool path, man, doing the thing in Africa and helping out, and honestly sacrificing a lot of your own endeavors to go do something that was really honorable, but then to pivot with the kid and kind of burn the boats and have to stand up this thing from nothing with your wife. Like, just mad respect. And I just think the the purpose behind it and what it's doing for guys and girls that are, you know, trying to get after it in the backcountry and being more prepared, but more so just having healthy lifestyles is so cool. So I hope, you know, we all should work together more in the future, because I think the values of the companies absolutely align. Yeah, I think that's all I got from my end. Tone, you got anything else?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, I personally enjoyed using your programming, and then just cool to watch you guys kind of grow. And even, like I said earlier, in my inner circles, just see the word start to spread. So super bullish on where you guys are heading. And yeah, it was cool to hear the details of how that got brought to life.
Thanks, Bear. Thanks, Tony. Same to you guys. I think it's like thinking about like young entrepreneurs. It's like, it's good for people like a Bear. I know your story is the same. It's good for people to not let fear stop them. Like there's going to be all these fears around getting something off the ground. And a lot of people have the coolest visions in their mind right now, the coolest business ideas, but they're scared to take that step. It's like, you gotta push that fear aside and just go for it.
100%. And in timing, you know, I think people are always waiting for the perfect time, and there's never going to be a perfect time where you're like, all right, I finally am ready. You know, I launched Born Primitive literally like 3 months before I was in the Navy, right? In like boot camp. So it's like, that's horrible timing. Now, maybe don't do that. I don't necessarily recommend that.
Still be discerning.
You know, you just had a kid, you know what I mean? So it's like, you know, chaos, dude.
Yeah.
And that success comes right at the edge of failure, man. And a lot of people aren't willing to go to that line and look over that edge, you know what I mean? And that's what holds them back from maybe, you know, kind of building something that would have exceeded their wildest, you know, imagination. So absolutely, if you're thinking about it, do it. You'll regret much more not doing it than doing it and failing. I guarantee that. But well, cool, man. Well, this has been awesome. Thanks for sharing your story. Don't be a stranger. Hopefully we'll see you out in Montana in 2024 now that when this airs, right? So,
yeah, it will be. Yep.
Yeah.
Hopefully this summer.
Yeah.
And yeah, appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Let's get you guys to the lab. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks,
All right,
Dustin.
Later.